Welcome to the newest episode of Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. I'm your host, Jason Fraley, picking the brains of the top filmmakers, musicians, and artists of our time. The classic rock band Kansas brings its 50th anniversary tour to Capital One Hall in Tysons, Virginia on March 2nd. I spoke to founding guitarist Richard Williams about the band's biggest hits, including Carry On Wayward Son, Point of No Return, and Dust in the Wind. Hey, Richard Williams. Hey, thanks so much for joining us on WTOP in DC.
It's great to be here.
We're talking because you obviously are a founding member and longtime guitarist of the iconic classic rock band Kansas, which is coming to rock Capital One Hall in Tysons, Virginia on March 2nd. Before we get to the show, I have to say happy birthday. Didn't you just turn, was it yesterday? You turned what, 74?
Yeah, it was. That was yesterday. We're in Pensacola, Florida for a show tonight. We got in last night. And my wife and I had a lovely dinner down here, and it's a new day. Excited to play the show tonight.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad that you and the wifey got the chance to celebrate a little bit on your busy tour. Well, let's tell everybody about this tour. You know, it's a 50th anniversary tour. It's called Another Fork in the Road is the tour name. But yeah, I mean, 50th anniversaries, I guess Kansas, what, you all started in what, 73? So 2023, yeah, would have been 50 years, and we're continuing it into 2024. How's the reaction to this tour been so far?
Oh, it's been fantastic. Really has. Kansas fans really seem to be enjoying it. It's a longer show and it goes a little bit more into depth. It's something a lot more. It's not really a show that would be something we play at a casino, say. It's really designed for, the hardcore Kansas fans with some deeper cuts that we haven't played, in 40 years.
Wow. So deeper cuts along with the big hits. You get it all.
Yeah, a bit of it all, and the band is really playing well. Everybody is. This bunch of guys is just so grateful to be out here on the road.
Absolutely.
Playing, as a lot of our peers are, I'm trying to think of a kind word, but they're retiring.
Yeah. They're phasing out, and you're still going.
Yeah. The fact that, we still have a relevance that is, packing houses is pretty remarkable. Yeah, we've always been a good band. It's not like we have a million hits, like Foreigner or something that can just play 2 hours of hits.
Right.
We have some, but we had some really big ones, and we resonated with our fan base, now and a long time ago, in a very lasting way, and that it has enabled us to continue.
Well, absolutely, and we can go into some of those hits in a moment. But first, I want to ask, like the current lineup. We interviewed Ronnie Platt a few years back. Is he still the lead singer now?
Oh yeah, Ronnie is still there.
And it's you and drummer Phil Ahart are you two pretty much the only two original, members, consistently throughout the years, along, because Ronnie's a relative newcomer in the rest. But what's it like, you and Phil? I mean, you're sort of holding it down as the wise sages here.
Yeah, it's Phil and I have been playing together. The first band I was in, which was called The Pets. We practiced in my basement, and that was the junior year in high school, so 1966. And that was my first band, and we've been playing together since then. So we're familiar. Billy Greer, bass player, has been with us almost 40 years, which is almost it's 3 times longer than Dave Hope, the original bass player. So
yeah,
it's hard at this point. He's been on a lot more records. It's hard to not call him an original. He's one of the new originals.
Exactly. Well, he probably played these songs more than the original, the quote original now, because he's been with the band longer now,
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Tom Breslin on keys. We were so fortunate to have him in the band. He'd he played the part of Rick Wakeman when they did their symphony tour. So he's played with Yes, he played with Blondie, he played for years with Meatloaf. He's played with so many people, along with his own band Spiraling. He's our music director. We've kind of handed him the ball of coordinating everything. He's a musical genius and such a gifted player. We have a new David Ragsdale, our violinist, had retired. Of course, and Robbie Sternhardt, the original violinist, passed away a few years back. Joe Denenzone from New Jersey is playing with us now, and he had his own band, and he was called the Jimi Hendrix of the violin, and he's a great performer, great guy, very talented. He's a Russian immigrant, moved here when he was 5. His whole family came over, and they moved to Cleveland. His father played in the Cleveland Symphony Orchestra. In fact, his father played with us when we did our symphony tour. His dad was in the orchestra then. His wife currently is in the first chair violin section of the New York Philharmonic. His uncles are violin players. I mean, it's this whole lineage of Russian immigrants that all grew up playing violin. And he's a really cool guy, very friendly, pleasant, dedicated, talented. Can't say enough about Joe. And there's the 2 old farts, me and Phil, that are still hanging in there and kicking butt.
I love it. And and tell me, you mentioned it sort of briefly, and but remind me of how the whole thing started. I mean, since this is the 50th anniversary tour, I'd love to remind our listeners sort of the origin in Topeka, Kansas there in 73. Was it like a garage band thing? Like you mentioned high school, known something since high school. So how'd you all actually get together, and when did Steve Walsh come in? Because I think he was originally from St. Louis, but how did you all merge there in Kansas and with the band name Kansas? I guess it happened in Kansas.
Yeah. Well, Steve was born in St. Louis and adopted. Grew up in St. Joe, Missouri, which is just across the border. How we all got, like Phil and I were in the first band together. And then I was in a different band. Phil was in other bands. And then we'd get together and play in bands. And I was in bands with Dave Hope. And bands back then seemed like they lasted about 6 months, and then they would mutate. And in our age group, there was X amount of players that you knew, and you would start a new band with. And this continued on. Like in 1969, I joined a group called White Clover, which was me and Phil and Dave Hope and others. And we lived in New Orleans for 6 months in late 69 through in early 70. Then I went back to college, hated that. Got back in a new version of White Clover, and that's where Steve Walsh came in. Phil had been playing in a little 3-piece band with Steve, and we had heard about and seen this violinist from Lawrence, Kansas, named Robbie Sternhardt, who was in a band, and we thought, he's not playing now. Let's get him. And so we had the 5 of us with Robbie, Phil, and I, Steve, and Dave Hope. We made a demo tape and sent it. We sent about 5 of these. They were reel to reel back then. Sent about 5 of them off into the blue, and one of them went up on Don Kirshner's desk. He really liked one of the songs called "Can I Tell You?" And we got a call one day. We're playing in Dodge City, and we're taking a break, and the bartender says, "You guys got a call from New York." So we took the call, and it was Wally Gold, who was one of his talent scouts, and said, "Yeah, we've been listening to your tape. We love the band. We want to come out and hear you guys." So I need to set up a show, and in the interim of that, Kerry Livgren's band had kind of dissolved, and Kerry was such a great songwriter. And that band was called Kansas, which Dave and Phil were in the original incarnation of that. after the New Orleans White Clover group broke up. It's so convoluted, it's hard to even tell the story.
Yeah.
So now we have the original 6 of the recording entity of Kansas. And so that's how we all got started. And I think what drew us together was, playing. We had enough of playing Holiday Inn lounges, and beer bars, and the occasional prom and stuff like that. And we were tired of playing cover material, and we were writing our own material. But what drew us together more than anything probably was we wanted to be unique. We didn't want to follow any particular trend, copy anything. And even, the management at the time and record company, even they were always prodding us, for, be more like this. And we just never did. We always had to do it our way. Even when we were had to play cover material, we would rewrite it just so we could make it our own,
right?
Rather than just doing it as off the record. And in hindsight, now, what I realize is what we were doing was we were learning, even with other people's material, we were learning how to be ourselves, and to take a song and run it through the Kansas meat grinder and make it sound like us, the way we wanted to be perceived, and what came natural to us. And we were very stubborn with that, and that's how it all got started.
Wow, thanks for recounting that. Yeah, because Ronnie Platt had shared some of that stories, secondhand as told to us a couple years ago. But it's nice hearing it from, you were actually there and running it through the Kansas meat grinder. That's hilarious. Well phrased. I love that. Well, eventually, you didn't have to run other people's songs through your Kansas meat grinder. Eventually, Kansas had its own, hit songs that other people would try to imitate years later. But and we won't go through all of them, but let's hit a couple of the big ones, because that'll help me queue up some songs for the radio when I play this thing. So I know on the fourth album, of course, Left Overture was huge because Carry On Wayward Son, obviously, I mean, one of the all-time songs in rock history. But do you remember how'd you guys come up with that idea to sort of just start it with that, a cappella right out of the gate before it kicks into your iconic riff, and then you have a great solo later in the song too, just iconic stuff. But yeah, memories of just sort of the creation of that before it became such an iconic thing.
Well, when we had been working for a couple of months, in writing material and rehearsing and getting ready to go to the studio, and it was literally the last day of these rehearsals. And I think we were just, I know we were just, let's just run through it real quick, and then we'll pack all the stuff up and put it in the truck and send it down to Louisiana where we were recording. Yeah. And Carrie walked in and says, I've got one more song. And it was, the aspect wasn't very well received. It's like, oh, brother. We thought we were done. And we'd had more than enough material learned to make an album. And he presents us, with a rough version of Wayward Son. And wow, this is cool. And it was like more presented in sections. And here's where the middle would be, and here's this, and here's the beginning riff, and the chords for the choruses and for the verses and things like that, and melody line. And okay, that's something to maybe put on the pile. And we really, in the recording process, it's kind of an assembly line. You've got the drums set up and fine-tuned and mic'd up, so you're going for basic tracks on each song. Basic tracks basically being the drum tracks. Yeah. And maybe try to get a bass track along with that. And so we're doing song by song by song by song, and we started going, well, it's time. We need to start learning that other song, so it's time to record it. And so we were editing, assembling where sections are going to be, and we were happy with the arrangement. And then we started recording. and the version on the album is really the first time we did it correctly, as far as getting a bass track. I mean, a drum track. It's like the producer pushes the button and said, I think we got one. And so that was that. Then you start layering guitars, keyboards, vocals, all that stuff on top of it to finish it. But somewhere along the line, and I really don't know whose idea it was, but it was such a strong chorus that was, let's put this chorus a cappella on the beginning. And that's a great idea. And there were some songs that were influential, in our age group. And the song that comes to mind the most, I know for like Dave Hope and I, was Three Dog Night with One.
Yeah.
The song One that starts a cappella. And we loved that. It was just so cool. And so let's so it was very agreeable to all to start with the a cappella section. And you're moving along through the record, and you're working on stuff, and all of a sudden it's the next couple of days we're doing solos. You're going song to song and doing guitar solos or Hammond organ solos, this and that. And it's not until you start you get in the mix mode where you're done recording, vocals are done, and you start assembling. And then one day we said, okay, we've got it now in the order we think is right. Let's sit back and listen to what we've got. And that's when we realized we really had something. And we knew, and the record company knew, that Wayward Son was going to be a big hit for us. It was just no doubting it.
And it was. And is it so? And that, that great guitar solo with it, ding, 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 like later in the song, like is that you? Or I know you were trading off with Kerry Livgren with keys and guitar back then. Like, but which part exactly was you? The hands that I'm talking to right now. What were they playing on that?
Well, we did like the riffs. Da, 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 da. That's unison. This Kerry and I playing together.
Okay.
He switches to keyboard, piano in the verses, and I'm playing acoustic guitar. Then also layered in was a clean electric guitar the second time around. The middle section that that's again Kerry and I. Steve Walsh, the Hammond solo. And then it goes through the riff again. Then that funky chicken picking solo. That's me. Yeah, and then Kerry takes the end.
Wow. Wait, the chicken picking is you said?
Yes.
Wow, that is so. I can't. Our listeners will get tickled listening. They're listening to this, and the voice talking on the other end of this, the hands on the other end of this are doing that iconic stuff. Man, that is just. It's an all timer.
Well, it was a cool part, and I was really into Gentle Giant at the time, and they were really good at everybody finding a place, not just playing along. But if there's a hole here, I'm going to fill that with a sound. And so that the riff going, I'm going to play notes in the spaces instead of just playing through it. And it'd work out. And that was my inspiration, was really, you hear a lot of, famous, like, old jazz saxophone players and stuff. Maybe even more important than the note is the air that you leave around it. And that's always kind of stuck with me, is it's got to breathe. It's just a flurry of constant notes. Well, it's nice, and it's like, wow, that was amazing. But there's something about space. Jeff Beck was great at that, with leaving holes, leaving a place for it to breathe. You wonder what's the next note going to be. You end phrases and begin new ones. And that was the inspiration in that section for me.
Wow, that's great. Thanks for such a detailed breakdown. That's great advice. To leave, space to let them around the notes to let them breathe, not to just be in a rush to get onto a flurry of other notes. That's so awesome. That's great advice. All right, and then of course the next album after that was Point of No Return in '77, and an awesome title track. Is it possible to give me a detailed breakdown, just like you did on Carry On Wayward Son, on Point of No Return? I mean, there's some really iconic keys and guitar in that too.
Well, what that was Phil came up with the album title, and Steve, as an opportunist, thought, well, I'm going to write a song called Point of No Return, so that will be, featured. And so the song came from Steve, and really, the hook of that was the with Hammond organ and the violin together.
Yep.
On the How Long. And Steve wrote the song. Minimal guitar on it. There's some acoustic in there and some areas of just very clean playing, but I played a just a supportive role in that because that's all it required. A lot of people think I have to play constantly all the way through a song, and I have to have a very standout part. And sometimes it's best to get out of the way and find a place where you can, just support what exists. And sometimes supporting it is not playing anything.
Again, great advice. Similar to the space around the notes that you mentioned last song. That's great. So I'm sensing a trend. Less is more sometimes. And real quick before we move off of that one, what's the symbolic nature of the point of KNOW, no return, as opposed to NO return? What was the concept?
Well, that came from our manager Bud Carr. He thought that would be a clever twist. Something to make all the acid-eating hippies out there to think about. I mean, that's really what it was just something to make us sound clever.
Well,
and we just say, yeah, fine, whatever.
Well, it worked. It worked.
Yeah, it was a good idea.
Absolutely.
It makes us. It's not like we don't have depth. We all have our deep moments.
Yeah.
But we're just a bunch of schmucks from Kansas, and we sat around and laughed a lot and cracked jokes and didn't take everything so seriously. But it was moments like that. Well, fans saying, "God, I wish I was in the room, during that think tank when they were conceiving of these things." And it's like, what?
We were schmucks from Kansas.
That are just writing the next thing that came natural.
Wow.
Of course, we did have a general consensus of what we wanted to be.
Yeah.
We didn't want to be like anybody else, and we were very inspired by the progressive stuff coming out of England and Europe.
Yeah.
And that inspiration was, think outside the box, throw the box away. Lyrically, you can do anything you want. Musically, you can, you're not stuck in 4/4. You're not stuck with these 4 chords. We can actually take inspiration from a little bit of jazz here and there. We can take a lot of inspiration we took from classical stuff. Carrie was listened to a lot of classical music. So and then having a violinist, but we didn't want a fiddle player. And so with a violin, it's difficult to not make it sound like a fiddle band. And so what we would do is we would create like sections in an orchestra, like in a middle section where it would be violin playing a note, me playing a note, and then maybe a synthesizer playing a note to create this section that like it would be in an orchestra. And so that was the approach to the violin and getting it in there was to not be a fiddle band, but to actually be very musical.
Wow, this is such great insight you're giving, and I could just sit back and listen to you all day. It's fantastic. Maybe time for one more in-depth song breakdown before we do a dismount question or wrap it back around to the tour. But we got to get something on "Dust in the Wind." Talking about the depth, subdued acoustic sort of thing, talking almost biblical, transcendent, existential stuff. But yeah, any insights on how that came together?
Well, that's just a pretty short story. Kerry was teaching himself how to finger pick, Travis picking style, because he just wanted to learn how to do it. And so he was practicing it. And his wife came by the guitar room and just said, "That's really nice. You ought to maybe write a song with that." And he goes, "Oh, I'm just practicing. And we would never do anything like this. This isn't what we do." But she kept on about it. Kerry, that's really good. And Kerry at the time he was always spiritually searching for things and reading all sorts of stuff. And at the time he was reading a book on Native Americans. And in that was this dust in the wind concept. And so he started writing lyrics and melody and stuff. And he threw it together very loosely and brought it to rehearsal. And like Wayward Son, it was the last thing brought to those rehearsals. So he turned on his reel-to-reel tape, and it was just him, a rudimentary recording of him playing. Had the lyric sheet, and him and Steve were standing next to each other, and he was singing in falsetto, poorly, the lyrics. And turned off the tape, and Dave Hope goes, "Where did that song come from?" He goes, "You like it?" And we all unanimously said, "Yeah, that's our next single." And Kerry goes, "Really?" And that was where it just kind of came out of nowhere. And that's really how that came along.
Wow. And it's still, thank you for that. And it's still being played today. I mean, Will Ferrell singing it in old school. There's your depth with your lowbrow schmucks from Kansas. You can hit highbrow and lowbrow, baby.
Well, a lot of people thought we were offended by it.
I'm sure you cracked up.
What people don't understand is anytime something is used in a movie, commercial, whatever, we see the script, we get to see how it's used, and all that a year before they've even finished filming.
Yeah,
we already know what it's going to be. And we approved it. So yeah, it was great.
Yeah, not to mention probably a little royalties on the back end. So you love that stuff. Well, it's pretty special what you've all done over 50 years. I mean, you've toured with everyone from Queen to Aerosmith, and I'm sure generations come out to this tour now at Capital One Hall. We get parents probably bringing their kids that grew up listening to this stuff, and maybe even grandkids at this point. But it's got to be special.
Exactly. Yeah, it's we get from 8 to 80.
Yep, and they're all rocking it. The kids play it in Guitar Band or Rock Band or whatever those video games are with the parents and grandparents that probably saw you live originally. It's a full circle moment. I know you got to go. What do we got to do to get you in the Rock Hall? Final seconds.
I don't know. I have a guitar there, but they won't let me in. So I'm probably going to take the guitar back.
They will someday. But in the meantime, everyone head out to Tysons, Virginia to Capital One Hall on March 2nd to see the iconic band Kansas. Guitarist here, Richard Williams. Thank you so much for doing this, spending so much time and going such in depth. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for listening to Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. Our theme music is Scott Buckley's Clarion. Remember to give us a 5-star rating if you like what you hear. We'll see you next time.